Zombies are real. Zombies are everywhere, near places you would never expect. In fact, some of you may have even encountered zombies in your life. Today, we explore the very real and awesomely creepy world of zombies. Welcome to The Wandering Naturalist, a Three Rivers Park District podcast.
I'm Angela, a wildlife biologist at Three Rivers Park District.
And I'm Brandon, an interpretive naturalist for Three Rivers Park District.
Three Rivers Park District manages over 27,000 acres of parklands in suburban Hennepin County and surrounding areas.
Join us as we wander from park to park and discuss the stories of the past, the nature in our present, and how these have shaped our parks.
Come explore with us, The Wandering Naturalist.
All right, Angela, so I'm very excited because this is one of my absolute favorite topics, zombies in real life.
You've been amped up about this all morning. And also, I think you were really excited about the maple syrup podcast.
Yes, I was.
But I think it's safe to say you're more excited about the zombie one.
I think I am. I love talking about zombies. You know, we've done like zombie survival camp at Eastman to talk about this and done some classes for it. So I'm super excited. And like all things, you could probably trace it back to some movies. So, you know, I feel like if we're going to talk zombies, we got to talk about our favorite zombie movie. Do you have a favorite zombie movie, Angela?
I am into zombies. I would say my favorite, because I like to find the humor in things, would be Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland. Those are probably my top two favorites that I can watch any amount of time and not get sick of.
I would say that those are probably my two favorites as well. I really like how Shaun of the Dead, nothing really changes in the end once everybody's zombies because they are basically zombies beforehand. The reason I think I like some of these movies too is because out of all the monsters in Hollywood, zombies are the ones that creep me out. And I think that's because they're the ones that have the most truth behind them.
Right.
You know, we're not really going to see vampires out there in real life. There's no, man from the Black Lagoon waiting to get us. But zombies do occur in nature. They're a little different, though, than how Hollywood portrays them.
Right. And I think that's why I like zombie stuff so much is looking at it from the approach of like a biologist. So I'm constantly like critiquing movies when I'm watching them. Like, oh, that would never happen. Oh, yeah. Okay. Why don't they touch on that? Like, I like picking them apart because I want to see how it actually connects to like real world, real life situations.
One of the main things I suppose that's different in Hollywood is things that die aren't actually going to come back to life and come after us and eat our brains. But the truth of it is really much weirder. And so we are going to be investigating that this month.
Yeah, so this month we will investigate real-life zombies in nature. And joining us today to investigate real-life zombies in the animal world are students of Brandon's, Evie and AJ, who received scholarships for work they did with zombies. That's B with B-E-E-S. And Dan Comerford will share with us how plants can become zombies. And then lastly, joining us, we will talk to Zach from The Landing to provide a historic perspective on where the idea of human zombies originates from. Come wander with us as we explore the strange world of zombie phenomenon well established in nature.
What I want to do is I want to talk about one of my favorite zombies. And the first time I became aware of this was when I worked for Voyageurs National Park up north.
You have some stories from there.
I've got just a few stories from there. I was there for a while, and this person comes in, and they've got a jar of water, and there is a spaghetti noodle swimming in that jar.
Like a worm?
That's what we found out it was. But they're like, why is this spaghetti noodle swimming? Because that's what it looked like. And we were like, we have no idea. We have no idea what that is. And so we talked to some of the biologists at the national park, and they told us it was a horsehair worm. And because it looks like a horsehair. Or I think it should have been called the spaghetti noodle worm, but whatever. It's a roundworm, which is a group of worms. And when we did some research about it to figure out more about it, that's when I first found out that zombies in nature actually do exist.
So how is this horsehair like a zombie?
So it's really awesome and super, super disturbing. The horsehair worm is a white, pale worm, kind of spaghetti-ish in color, that's about 2 to 4 inches long. And when you see it as an adult, it just looks like a swimming piece of spaghetti in the water. But they'll congregate in these massive groups of like writhing worms to fertilize eggs and then lay eggs. And so that's how it leads to their other name, the Gordian knot, because they look like this massive knot of wiggling strings all tied together. And then what happens is they will lay their eggs somewhere on land. Now, there's over 2,000 species of horsehair worms in the world, and they all will end up becoming a parasite or a parasitoid within a host. But there's two species.
What is a parasitoid?
Good point. So this is not the nature word of the day, but
Stay
a
tuned.
parasitoid is a parasite that kills its host.
Okay. So this is an entomology term.
Yeah, because it occurs mostly in insects. Basically, we can think of a parasite as being something like a tick or a mosquito that sucks our blood. A parasitoid takes it one step further. It lives off its host, and then it kills its host to survive.
All right. So this is kind of our nature zombie equivalent.
Yes, it's literally draining the life from its host so it could stay alive. And what makes the horsehair worm a zombie maker, there are two species that we know of that actually take control of their host.
That is fascinating. So what are they doing to... There's got to be a gain for them. So what is the advantage for them by taking control?
So we kind of got to start at the beginning. What happens is the horsehair worm will lay its eggs on vegetation along the shoreline because they live in water. And then a host, like a cricket, will come along and it will eat that vegetation, accidentally eat the eggs of these horsehair worms. And then once that egg gets into the gut of the cricket, the egg hatches and the horsehair worm starts to eat the cricket from the inside out.
Gross.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. It eats the blood, it eats the guts, it eats the muscles.
But it's still alive.
The cricket is still alive. It's hopping around doing its thing, eating vegetation. Probably doesn't feel very good, but it's got this massive worm that's growing inside of it and eating more and more of its insides until it gets to the point where the horsehair worm is way longer than the cricket.
You said 2 to 4 inches.
2 to 4 inches. And so it has to be coiled up in this tight coil in the abdomen cavity that it's made inside this cricket. Now, it can't keep living in the cricket because it's just really, itty bitty living space.
Well, and you mentioned it has to be in water.
It's got to get back to water. So at least two species of these horsehair worms will somehow take over the brain of the cricket. We think they release some kind of hormones or something. And what that does is it forces the cricket to find a body of water and jump in.
Suicidal.
Yes, because crickets avoid water. They don't want to get in puddles of water because they'll drown. But when they get taken over by this zombie worm, they seek out water. They jump in. If you remove it from the water, it'll immediately jump back in again. And then they just stay in the water. And the horsehair worm exits the abdominal cavity of the cricket or the host. And eventually the host just dies in the water.
Wow.
So it is taking over control of the actions of this cricket or this other host so it can survive. So it's just really, really cool. And that was really my first experience with something in the natural world being taken over almost like a zombie, changing your behaviors, forcing you to do something you wouldn't normally do.
And from my understanding with the diversity of these horsehair worms, not all take control of the brain. Some of them, they'll just exit the host when they get near water, more as a kind of an opportunistic.
Yes, and that my understanding too is that that's the majority of species. I think we've only found two species so far that we have proof they take over the brains of crickets. The other 2,000 odd species, as far as we can tell, they just wait to be around water. But it's still really fascinating. It's still really cool.
And there's some really cool videos out there. I was reading, too, that some, I don't think this is anywhere near here, but there's some that have been recorded like way longer than 2 to 4 inches, like 2 meters long. I thought, I swear
awful.
I swear I read that somewhere. But there's really cool videos, and we'll make sure to share these on social media, too, of these horsehair worms leaving the body of things like crickets and grasshoppers, and it's just gives me the creepy crawlies.
Well, there's even one where it's from Australia, and this person sprayed this massive spider from Australia in their home with Raid, and the horsehair worm, right? I suppose it might have been venomous. I don't know, but the horsehair worm exited the body because they thought the Raid was water, and they think what happened was that this horsehair worm had infected some kind of cricket or other planting an
Oh,
arthropod.
and then the tarantula ate it.
And it ended up ingesting the horsehair worm, and the horsehair worm started parasitizing this tarantula.
It's
So
like
they're
an
known for
inception of
right?
parasitoids.
They're known for surviving the deaths of their hosts, and then infecting whatever it is that ate their host too, which is
That's pretty remarkable.
yeah.
All right, so a next one to get in, which is a fun one of mine, is the cordyceps fungus.
I love cordyceps
And
fungus.
so this has to deal with ants. So those that are a fan of ants, this is bad news for the ant, unfortunately, as the moral of this podcast is going to be. But like the horsehair worm is a parasitoid, which again we said is an insect whose larvae live as a parasite, then eventually kill their host. And it infects its host through spores. So now we're getting into some of this fungi stuff, which we're going to have a podcast just on
fungi.
fungi.
Amazing.
So the spores grow mycelium.
So
Ta-da!
what is mycelium?
Yeah, mycelium's a fun word, and I'm going to take advantage here. I will say, besides this, it doesn't have a lot to do with zombies, but it's just one of those words that I feel like people don't know about. And mycelium translates to, from Greek and Latin, nail of fungus. So when you think of a mushroom, what do you think of?
I think of a mushroom.
Like an actual mushroom
like
you
an actual
eat.
mushroom, like the morel or,
Right.
the cap and the stalk. And yeah.
that equates to like the flower of a plant. So that's like
Right.
the fruiting body, how it reproduces. But not actually all fungi create mushrooms. The real beauty and power behind fungi are the mycelium, which is the equivalent to the roots of a plant, if that makes sense.
Or the body even of
right.
the mushroom itself.
It's what takes the nutrients in. It's this just magical world going on underneath. And if you think about if you've walked in nature and you've turned a log over, like a rotten log, and you see these kind of sporadic white patches.
Or even black sometimes.
Yeah, different
Yeah.
colors. That's the mycelium.
Can I give an example quick to show
Yes.
just how massive mycelium is? So there's arguments about what is the largest living organism.
Yeah, I was hoping that's what you were going to talk
But
about.
one of the contenders is a fungus in Oregon, I believe it is.
Yeah, and I think it's like over 2 miles long.
It's 2,700 acres. That's half the size of Elm Creek Park Reserve. 2,700 acres, and almost all of it is mycelium. Its mushrooms are actually really small. And so that just shows how important the mycelium is. That's what the body of the fungus is. The mushroom, that's just this tiny little part that we happen to see, but the mycelium is underneath us.
So we digress. But mycelium, the nature word of the podcast. So again, we were talking about this because we're talking about a parasitic fungus, the cordyceps, and how it relates to ants. So, okay, back to the cordyceps. Each species of cordyceps is specific, only able to infect a specific kind of insect. So it can also go outside of ants as well.
Yeah, I've seen videos where there's moths that are infected, katydids, and in each species of cordyceps infects that specific species of insect.
Right, so very specific relationships here. But where a lot of this first came from was tropical carpenter ants in the rainforest, and I believe it was in Thailand. A researcher from Penn State, David Hughes. And so what they were finding were these ants that had these spore-like things that had grown out of their head. The ants were dead, and they were finding these.
That's really cool.
So imagine,
there's
yes.
like a mushroom growing out of the ant's head.
Exactly. And so what happens here, and again, it's crazy to think of plants or fungi thinking, or it's just a different way. Like it's easier for us to say, "Oh, my dog's thinking this," or for
Right.
for whatever reason, it's easier to think that way with animals.
Thinking about a fungi, they don't have a brain, so how can they do that? But it does almost, we're not saying that they're thinking, but it seems like there's some kind of
Yeah.
thought process going on because the fungus is very specific about where it wants that ant to go. Can you
So,
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the spores are on the forest floor.
Yep.
And the ant's going to pick that up as it's moving around or eating vegetation. Those spores are going to attach to it. And then they somehow get inside of the ant, breaks through. And then it, like with the horseworm, devours it from the inside out while it's still alive. And it eventually gets to the brain and to the head area.
And somehow the mycelium reaches in the brain and it changes its behavior.
Yeah, it can control. So one of the things it'll do is it'll make it crawl up. And it seems to almost make it crawl to like the most perfect spot so that it can release its spores again below where other ants are going to be. So this isn't just an accidental thing. Again, it's very purposeful and being strategic. And so it'll control it to climb up, go to the underside of a leaf, and then it can actually control the muscles of the mandibles to clasp onto the mid vein of that underside of the leaf and lock in place. So that ant's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, it like destroys the muscles then and uses its mycelium to keep that jaw closed.
Even if it dies, it's still going to be in that clenched on position. And so then that is when, boom, out of the head, the spores, the fruiting body comes, the spores are released, and the cycle starts all over again.
And it forces this ant to climb above its own nest, find the ideal location above on the other side of a leaf, and then spray the spores on all of that ant's sisters and infect its own sisters. I mean, that's insidious.
Yeah, that's pretty zombie.
It's awesome. And you mentioned this was in India, where it was first found, or Thailand. I'm sorry, where it was first found. The ones I know about are from the Amazon, where it does that to army ants, and other species of ants too. And some ants actually, they realize what a big threat, realize in quotations, what a big threat this is to their colony. And they've learned to detect ants that are infected with cordyceps, and they will force them out of the ant colony so they won't get affected. But they can't always pick up on it. And then this can destroy entire ant colonies.
Yeah, and this stuff is really fascinating and still being researched, because if you think about how we could actually use this to our advantage.
Ooh, natural pest control.
So yeah, they're thinking that this could be used to control pest insects at homes and in farms.
Yeah.
If there would be a way for us to kind of engineer and manipulate this type of relationship.
That would be really cool, because then we'd be using less pesticides. Actually, in 2018, there's some speculation that there was a cordyceps outbreak in Minnesota, because in that fall, people started reporting everywhere that they were finding these just clumps of dead flies with white mycelium coming out of their bodies on plants. And so I don't know if researchers ever looked into it, but the thought was that this was cordyceps that just happened to have a particularly good year in Minnesota, the 2018 fall, and was killing off all these flies. Which I thought was pretty cool to go out. I saw some in my own prairie. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool bucket list find in nature if you can find an example of this right in your own backyard.
I was pretty pumped. And another thing I like about this cordyceps fungus is that it's actually made its way into popular culture. In my opinion, the most accurate representation of zombies in popular culture actually comes from a video game called The Last of Us, because that whole game is built on the premise of a cordyceps fungus mutating and infecting humans, and then taking over humans and cause them to infect other humans with spores.
I will admit, I remember seeing ads for that video game as PlayStation 3 or PlayStation. And it's one of those where you see like the storyline and you're captivated and you're
like, as a biologist,
this sounds so cool. I never did get to play it.
I only played like a level or two. I know it was the number 3 selling game for PlayStation 3. Now, we don't have to worry about cordyceps infecting us because it's completely fictional. It's very targeted. It's only targeting arthropods, insects, and their relatives. But it was a cool video game idea. And, you know, it really ties into that whole, I think, fear that we have of eventually losing control of ourselves. And I think that's why we fear zombies so much.
Yeah, and it could be the fungi and plants. Watch out.
Yeah. Now, I think no conversation would be complete without what I am personally convinced is the most likely vector for the start of Z-Day. And
I want to say first, for the record, I am a cat owner. I love all animals, including cats. So this is no way to say cats are evil or bad. Right, Brandon?
No, they're evil and bad.
I tried.
I agree. Cats are fun. But I'm pretty sure they're going to start the zombie apocalypse.
All right. So you've got to explain now.
Okay. So I think we've all heard of something called toxoplasmosis. You know, it's this thing where if you're pregnant, you shouldn't change cat litter because
Everybody
of the potential of getting toxoplasmosis. But we don't necessarily know what that is.
It's confusing. It's pretty detailed.
And it's what's going to start the zombie apocalypse.
Yes,
Not really,
that is one way to look at it.
So toxoplasmosis is a protist, and a protist is basically a living thing that we don't know what else to call it, so we call it a protist.
It's microscopic.
Microscopic,
right?
single-celled creature, and it's a parasite, not a parasitoid, but a parasite in cats.
And it's called Toxoplasma gondii?
Yes. And
I say that I struggle at scientific names.
Oh, so. I took Latin in high school, and I can't pronounce it for the life of me.
So that's the name of the single-celled parasite.
And what it does is it lives in the intestines of cats to reproduce, and then its eggs, it's spore-like not really eggs, but not really spore-like creatures. It's offspring.
Yeah, there's a technical word, isn't it? Like ocytes or
Yeah, it's basically like an egg. It lives in the cat poop. And about a day after the cat deposits its scat, this parasite can start infecting other creatures. And ideally, it wants to infect a mouse or maybe even a bird, something a cat is going to eat.
Why would it want that?
Because it's going to get into the mouse. Well, I'll use mouse for an example because that's something that it really wants to parasitize. And it'll spread throughout that mouse. It'll form cysts in its muscles. It'll form cysts in its brains.
Yeah, it spreads throughout the body.
Yes, form cysts in the eyes of the mouse. And it actually starts to change the behavior of mice.
How so?
It gets rid of their fear. And so it reduces its fear response. Exactly, especially if you think about mouse as prey.
Yeah.
And so what it does is somehow it changes, so it reduces the fear in mice so that then mice are not afraid when they see signs of cats, and that even makes mice like the smell of cat urine and be attracted to it.
Who likes that?
Right? So mice now will run towards cat urine because they like the smell of it, which makes them easy prey for cats. So then the cat will eat it, and then the cat will be infected then by this toxoplasmosis, and then the adults can inhabit the cat's intestinal tract and start reproducing again.
So
and
that's reproducing sexually that way.
Yes.
Because from my understanding, toxoplasmosis can also reproduce asexually, an intermediate host.
Like a mouse.
Or anything
that's warm-blooded.
Warm-blooded. So that's why this one is kind of one of those... Wow, because it's one of the most successful parasites in the animal kingdom because it can affect any warm-blooded
creature. Yeah, including us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've known for a long time that toxoplasmosis occurs in humans. When people tend to get toxoplasmosis, they get flu-like symptoms. And then we know that the cysts of this creature will get in our muscles, it'll get in our eyes, it'll even get in our brains.
Central nervous system.
But, we're like, we're humans. Things can't affect us. It doesn't have any effect on us. But newer research is starting to show that might not necessarily be true.
Yeah, I would recommend Google this because you're going to find so much stuff, so much research that's been done. And so we have to give a disclaimer here, and we talked about this, that, research and papers can be hard to navigate, and also you have to keep in mind that a lot of these things can be very happenstantial. I don't know if that's the right word or way to...
News outlets like to take a science story and make it like, oh my gosh, this is going to kill us all. And then you read the article and it's like, that's not what the scientist said at all. So this is really a case of correlation, not causation. It's kind of the same thing as saying that every left-handed person who drank water is someday going to die. I mean, it's true.
We know that's pretty far-fetched.
Is the water really what's causing you to die? Probably not.
Yeah.
So right now we're at the point where these symptoms we're going to talk about, the toxoplasmosis causes, or that are occurring in humans, it's correlation. We don't know for sure toxoplasmosis is causing it, but scientists think that enough strange systems occur with people who have toxoplasmosis. They want to see if there is causation, if the toxoplasmosis is actually causing it.
All right.
So don't go get rid of your cats right now, because we don't know for sure it's causing these symptoms in people. Just correlation.
Yeah.
But we're doing research to see, is it actually affecting them? Because there is some intriguing signs that it might be.
So what are some of these behavioral
it's
things?
Awesome. So it seems like, just like in cats where it reduces a human fear or the mouse's fear response, it reduces the fear response in humans too, and the anxiety response. And because men and women deal with anxiety and fear in different ways, it actually changes behavior in men and women in different ways. Some studies have shown evidence that men tend to care less about their appearance, they tend to wear clothes that are more worn out, and they tend to become more introverted. Whereas in women who get infected by toxoplasmosis, they tend to care more about their appearance. They tend to become more extroverted after they've been infected.
So this is kind of where crazy cat lady is a real thing?
So that is a crazy cat lady. I think there must be crazy cat guy too.
Yeah,
I never hear about crazy cat guy. If you're a crazy cat guy, let us know.
We want to hear from you.
But crazy cat lady, crazy cat guy syndrome, they think is real. They think it's this toxoplasma getting into these people's brains and changing their behavior, because there is evidence that if you are infected with toxoplasma or plasmosis, humans will prefer the smell of cat urine. And it makes you want to be around cats more. So that's where the crazy cat person could actually be a real thing. So that's another change. There is evidence that Let's see here. I want to make sure I'm getting all of my numbers right. There's evidence that people who are in car accidents are more likely to have a toxoplasma
Yeah, that
infection.
one I kind of did the same thing with like the
Again,
left-handed.
correlation. The thought there is that because it reduces your fear response, you might be more inclined to take more risky behavior when you're driving your car.
Makes sense.
Along the same lines, when you go to entrepreneurial conferences,
I read that one.
people who have started their own business were twice as likely to be infected with toxoplasmosis. Again, is it reducing your fear response to make this happen? It's all correlation. We don't know yet that this is causing it, but it is intriguing.
It is very intriguing. I think it's important to know that I probably have it.
I'm pretty sure you do. Yes.
I grew up with cats. I love cats. My mom always told me I'd play in the cat food and yell at the cat like it was their fault. So there's no reason to ditch your cats, people. It's not like this is
Most people with it are probably still normally functioning humans in human society.
Exactly. It's not something deadly or going to kill you unless maybe you're in a vulnerable state. So there is some risks there and things to keep in mind.
Which is what really intrigues me, because there is some research that shows that people who have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia are more likely to be infected by toxoplasma. And so some researchers' thoughts are toxoplasma isn't causing this, but people who may already be vulnerable to those conditions, toxoplasma may help trigger it. It may be one of the factors that can help trigger it in a person. And there's evidence that schizophrenia did not exist in humans until we domesticated cats. So again, correlation, not causation, but I find it interesting that this tiny little parasitoid may actually be changing our behavior. I think that's really, really cool. Worldwide, it's estimated that 30 to 50% of people in the world are infected with toxoplasmosis. In the U.S., because we tend to have more hygienic living conditions, it's estimated that that's only around 11% of people. So 1 out of every 10 people may be, a partial zombie. You don't know. But
Be careful.
yeah, again,
So I think the big thing here is and how this parasite, its life cycle works. Keep your litter box clean. They say daily because it actually takes a full day for the parasite to be active.
Yep.
So keep your litter box clean, wash your hands. But you can also get it from things like unwashed food, vegetables, contaminants in the soil, and also undercooked food as well. So it's not just, all bad rap for the kitty cats out there.
Much as I would like it to be.
So I will be that disclaimer there. So no reason to ditch your cats. They bring cuddles and happiness. Just be careful around their poop. Keep them from eating mice. Keep them indoors. This is so important, folks, especially because how many birds are killed by cats outside?
So a study showed that just in the U.S., over 1 billion songbirds are killed by cats a year.
Yeah.
So keep your cats inside because it's going to protect our songbirds. It's a huge benefit to the environment. And it's going to make sure you don't get toxoplasmosis because cats can only infect you with toxoplasmosis within 1 to 3 weeks of being outside and eating a mouse or another prey that had it.
Yeah.
If your cat is inside for its entire life, it will not get toxoplasmosis. You will not get infected. It's actually really easy to keep yourself from being infected. And even if you are infected, you know how you are. You're probably functioning. And, we mentioned how, it's dangerous to change cat litter if you're pregnant. That's for a new infection, toxoplasmosis, because it's going through the bloodstream. If you were infected before you're pregnant, it's going to be perfectly fine.
Right.
But I think the long story of it is keep paying attention to these stories because I think they're fascinating. And I'm really intrigued by the fact that a single-celled organism could potentially change our behavior. I think that's really, really cool. But still love your cats. Take a couple of safety steps to make sure you don't get infected and keep your cats indoors. Aside from being safer for you, it's a lot safer for our environment.
So next we're going to talk and have some guests join us to talk about zombies that we mentioned earlier.
We're already talking about zombies, Angela.
No, these are different. The BEE.
Yes, I'm really excited for that. So we have a couple of students that are going to come and share their research and a project they did on that. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy our next topic as we continue talking about zombies and zombies.